soft, bready crust.
I spent a week in Portland in the late '90s, and I don't think I've ever fell in love with a city harder than I fell in love with Portland. If I could afford to live there, I would.
Cybernation Uncensored.
We are very happy to have you here, Chris.
We are happy, and welcome to the show. This is the Tales from the Forlorn Dopes. I'm one of the hosts, Cybersmily.
I'm the other host, Wisdom, and yeah, we have a great show lined up for you today, folks. We've got Chris Hockabout,
Yes.
Creator of Interface. Yeah, that's welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is great.
All right, so first off, what we're going to do is, before we start getting into what you're all about, Chris, is we got a questionnaire. So this is like what we'll call the full auto questionnaire. It's short answers, short questions. There's no wrong answers, but there is one right answer in this list. So keep that in mind. So,
okay.
Yeah, so first question. 2020, 2045, 2077.
2020. I'd have to say 2077.
Okay. Favorite Cyberpunk role?
Fixer.
Favorite piece of cyberware?
I'd say the one I invented, the monoptic cyber optic option.
Nice.
The mono.
That one's badass.
Favorite Cyberpunk weapon?
Oh, the Rostovic wrist ractate.
Nice. Favorite?
Although I think it's probably pronounced Rostovich.
Probably Rostovich.
I always pronounced it Rockete as a kid because that was dumb.
Favorite Cyberpunk Red or 2020 book?
The Night City Sourcebook for 2020.
Least favorite Cyberpunk Red or 2020 book?
The Arasaka Brainworm.
All right.
Yeah, I can buy that. I can buy that completely.
Pam Ann, Judy, or Rogue?
Rogue. Just something about her.
Lucy, Rebecca, or Kiwi?
It's classic. Oh, Rebecca, man. That's my kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love women who can kick my ass.
Carrie, River, or Goro?
Goro. I know his allegiances are divided, but there's just something about that kind of like a quiet, like noble thing.
He has his principles, you know. David, Maine, or Pillar?
David. I like him.
Favorite? He is a good kid. Favorite Night City gang?
Bozos.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Sorry, man.
Classic piece of art, man. Favorite mega corporation?
You know, my punk rock sensibilities just, screw them all. But like, if I had to pick, it'd probably actually be info. It would actually be Netwatch. Just
Okay.
there's just like the kind of like, I don't know, high tech netrunner sleuth AI hunter kind of thing. Just something kind of cool about that to me.
Right. Favorite cyberpunk movie?
Yeah, Blade Runner, man. It's kind of like where it all started. It's hard to get better than that. But close second would be the Max Headroom TV series.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely good. Favorite cyberpunk fictional character?
Aubrey Knight from the
I
Street
love those
Lethal
books.
series.
I fucking love those books.
Gibson.
Nobody ever mentions them either.
Yeah.
Yes. Stephen Barnes, Cyberpunk without the cyberware. Everyone needs to read them. Yeah, Street Lethal and Gorgon Child, both fantastic. Probably followed up by Marid Audron from George Alec Effinger's
When Gravity Fails.
When Gravity Fails series.
Okay. Gibson, Dix, or Stevenson?
Stevenson.
Favorite cyberpunk novel?
Let's see. Actually, Paolo Bacigalupi's The Wind-Up Girl. What is it called?
I'll have to check that out.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Yeah. Actually, probably I want to check his short story series too.
Will do.
Yeah, good stuff.
And the final question is Shadowrun cyberpunk?
Yeah.
Buzz, wrong.
This is different flavors. Hopefully.
Nope. It's not cyberpunk.
He's adamant about that one.
I am.
It's not. It's certainly not. It's certainly not my brand of cyberpunk. Because like I wanted something like that, and
Listen.
it was just too fucking colorful and like. Yeah, it just wasn't dark enough, man.
Reese's
My
peanut.
answer's
Like,
always
that was
been
why. That was.
No, my philosophy is.
I mean, that was
a
kind of
Reese's
the
peanut
motivation
butter
behind.
cup. A Reese's peanut butter cup is not peanut butter. So therefore, Shadowrun is not cyberpunk. Yes, it's a blend.
It's Cyberpunk
Well, it
adjacent.
contains cyberpunk.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you can tell
Cyberpunk
similar
adjacent is
stories with it.
my go-to for anytime anybody mentions Shadowrun. I'm just like Cyberpunk adjacent.
Yep.
And I mean, that's part of why we did the Dark Time, the whole Cthulhu crossover, was because, if I were to do a magical cyberpunk,
Yeah,
it would have been, I had
Dark and
actually an
old.
idea. It was the idea of like dark street magic, and kind of like if you had like unknown armies, but set in a cyberpunk setting,
yeah.
Well, it's cyberpunk fantasy, which is not pure cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
And if
go ahead, finish the thought.
oh well, I met my best friend, or one of my best friends, Marcus Flores, who was actually one of the co-creators on The Secret of Zoran, my RPG. He and I met at a game store a year before we actually became friends, when he was looking over a Shadowrun book, and I was super evangelical, like, completely up my own ass, cyberpunk nut. And I saw him like going, "Hey man, if you like that, you should check out Cyberpunk." And then I just like mic dropped and like walked away. I was such an ass. And he like looks at his friends like, "Who the hell is that guy?" And then a year later, I go to a party and we sit down, and I'm sitting right across where we look at each other. And we're like, "Hey, you're that guy." And then we struck up a conversation and have been,
Yeah, I'm still a bit of an evangelical on it, but that's just me. Can't change my ways. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'm going to read off your credits for our audience so they know who you are and what they can check out your stuff. So first off, credits, Cyberpunk 2020. You're the co-founder of Interface Magazine. There were 6 issues. You were a writer and artist for it. Cyberpunk 2020 core book, you were an artist for. When Gravity Fails, artist for. Chromebook 2 to 3 4, you actually were a contributor because of the interface pullover. Rocker Boy, Night City, Forlorn Hope, Euro Tour, Near Orbit, Deep Space, Home of the Brave, Land of the Free, Listen Up You Primitive Screwheads, Live and Direct. Then you also did some Cyber Generation supplements, art for that. You were also a co-creator of Secrets of Xenon. And
Zeron.
Okay.
Zeron.
Got it. For computer gaming, you were artist, writer for a bunch of different games. I'll list them out. If you want, the audience can go check out. Chris Hockabout actually has an IMDb page, so you can check out his credits there. Star Wars Bounty Hunter, New Legends, Star Wars Jedi Knight, Mystery of the Sith, Curse of the Monkey Island, Star Wars Jedi Knight, Dark Force 2, Afterlife, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, Big Sky Trooper, Metal Warriors, Star Wars Dark Force, Batman the Enemy Within, Batman the Telltale series, Samiri, The Walking Dead, Michonne. Games of Thrones, a Telltale Games series, Armed and Dangerous, Star Wars Jedi Knight Force, Dark Force 2, Full Throttle.
I fucking love that game.
And you're a writer for Batman: The Enemy Within, The Walking Dead, Michonne, and Game of Thrones, a Telltale Games series. Oh, and New Legends. You were also a writer. Am I missing anything?
Well, for one, Interface would have never happened without Thaddeus House. He was the adult in the room, and like I was just a little like snot-nosed kid with a home printed magazine that I got to show Mike Pondsmith. And if Mike Pondsmith hadn't kind of like roped in Thaddeus, who was my GM or my close friend at the time and game master, Interface probably never would have happened. And I guess probably the one thing that may be missing that I'm actually really proud of is I got to work on City of Heroes, the MMO.
Oh, excellent.
Okay.
Towards the end of its life, and I was the lead world designer there. And that involved basically designing zones from the ground up and plotting them all out, and then sort of like working with the quest designers and the artists and fully realizing it. And I got to design an entire zone, map it out all myself, and like build all the way up for the Going Rogue expansion, which had this whole other like mirror universe evil version of the main setting called Pretoria, and with evil versions of the heroes from the main game.
And did everyone have a goatee?
They shoulda. And even though there was like there was probably only 35,000 people playing City Heroes at that time, but
I was one of them. I definitely, as far as superhero like video games go, I think it's probably my favorite of all time, to be honest.
Yeah. Mine too. So I'm really proud of the stuff I've done on City Heroes. But yeah, I guess that covers it. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
So, how did you originally get into tabletop gaming?
September 1980, I think. Friend's birthday party, and had this thing called Dungeons and Dragons, and I made a magic user, and I fired my one magic missile I could cast for the day at a thing, and fell into a underground river, struck my head on a stalactite, was knocked unconscious and drowned, and I was hooked. Like that was, Like, you know, that first character, I always sort of like think about that first character. Didn't even have a name, because of course, new to role playing games, the whole concept entirely. You know, you really think. I didn't really even have a concept of this avatar as having a personality or an identity separate from myself. But I knew immediately sort of like what the possibilities were, and I'd always been one of those kids who drew a lot, so I had kind of a bit of an artistic sensibility and a fantastical one too. And it was kind of a hard time for me as a kid, and I really needed kind of an escape. And D&D was just like everything I needed at that moment in my life. And I was also like the one kid who was like, I'll be dungeon master, because everyone wanted to play. So I was like the one kid who was like, yeah, no, that's cool. And I became the group's DM, you know. And but as they got older, from 6th to 8th grade, that initial circle of friends, you know, they all wanted to do grown-up things.
Yep.
Like date girls, but also not so cool things like, you know, stealing Valium from mom and dad's medicine cabinet, and, you know, getting drunk on the weekends while the parents are out boating, and I was not about that. I just wanted to play D&D.
Yeah.
So that was sort of like the transition between.
We all have our own drugs.
Yeah, and
D&D was
between
cheaper.
actually being well, and having friends who were in my class, as opposed to the friends I was making at the game store on the weekends.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up, that, you know, your character played and your character died. It sounded pretty dramatically. And I hear that from a lot of like old school players who initially got into it was, hey, my character just died from being killed by some trap or some monster or whatever, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
I think there's also this element that some people think that, oh, if you kill the character, they might not come back and play. But it's not always true, you know?
Nah, it's the violence that hooks you in.
Yeah. Well, I think that players are more apt to identify with the characters they create these days, and I actually think that's kind of a beautiful thing. And
I agree.
the amount of investiture that people are putting into their characters, the amount of thought and the artistry that's kind of like coming out from that, is wonderful. And I think it's also bred a more kind of, you know, the idea of the adversarial relationship between the game master and the player is pretty much a thing of the past, and good, because any of us who were playing, you know, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, was probably encountered that one game master who just kind of gleefully would kill the players' characters.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and even that, I mean, that was their goal, you know.
Recording
Let's do it.
TPKs like notches in their belt.
Yeah. But, you know, doing it within the rules, of course, you know, it's not fair if I don't kill you according to the rules, you know.
Exactly. Well, I think it's also an old school thing because, so I go to a convention up here in New England, who, like some of the old school D&D guys have frequent, and Tim Kask goes to that convention and runs some games, and he has no problem with killing the party if they're stupid, you know, and doing stupid things.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, you know, half an hour
Yeah.
in, I killed the whole group, and guess what? The event's over. And they're like, well, it's a con game. You should be continuing. He's like, no, you guys are idiots. Where's your 10-foot pole? Where's, you know, the old school stuff that he grew up on, you know?
Send in the chicken.
Well, I think that's why. Well, I think that's why, like, I love playing dungeon crawl classics, and I love the Gauntlet, the Crucible, playing a group of level zeros and then and watching them just like fall one by one until you've got that one character left over, and I think it's finally taking that kind of very predatory game mastering style, but making it actually fun and building it into the mechanics of the game, um, which I like. But me, I tend to try. I look at the campaigns I'm running as an actual, like a TV series, and I don't like to remove main characters from the story
Yeah.
unduly, even if they do something stupid. I prefer to mutilate my player characters mentally and physically so that they learn a lesson and try to maybe think think a little more about their various plans next time.
Yes.
Yeah, maiming is just so much more fun.
Yeah, but sometimes the dice fall where they may, and I had a friend who 10-year-long campaign
Well,
got to the final boss, and boom, TPK.
Oh.
10-year-long campaign, just over.
I've
That's
been
rough.
there.
That's so rough.
Yeah, I think we all have our horror stories of games, but I think as a GM, if your GM kills you outright, he's more sympathetic to the party versus the one who prefers to elongate the torture, who's I think more sadistic in nature.
Well, I guess I'm more sadistic in nature.
There you go. So what drew you into Cyberpunk 2013, 2020, and the whole that game experience after running, or being part of Dungeons and Dragons for so long?
Well, I picked up the first edition. I was introduced to it by a friend who since passed away, and so I was in college when he introduced me to it, and I thought it was fantastic. And I had actually stopped playing D&D, probably in 8th grade. I was kind of getting tired of the caliber of players I was running into a lot of times. A lot of guys with big, thick, three-ring notebooks of character stuff who were just like, lording their D&D lore over your head. And so I wanted a better experience. And so my gateway drug out of D&D was Call of Cthulhu. And so Call of Cthulhu is actually still to this day my favorite RPG. And played Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu was probably the best teacher when it came to breaking me out of the D&D mindset of like fighting monsters and exploring dungeons and collecting treasure and having a power creep in the Zero to Hero sort of like style of Dungeons and Dragons. And where Call of Cthulhu is all just about story and role playing. And you don't want the magic items in Call of Cthulhu, and you want to run away from the monsters in Call of Cthulhu. And so that was probably where I kind of like developed a lot of my storytelling chops. Probably running a lot of Call of Cthulhu, and then also Champions played a lot of Champions. Played multi-year campaigns of Champions, and Vampire. Got into Vampire Masquerade when it came out, and ran a multi-year-long Vampire the Masquerade campaign. And had actually started my own homebrew world using Chaosium's basic role-playing system when Cyberpunk 2013 came out. And so I was pretty much already like, yeah, this is fantastic. This is, I'm waiting for a game like this to come out. And the funny thing is, actually, in 8th grade, I kind of actually wrote my first Cyberpunk RPG without kind of realizing it. Because I'd actually been, like, I started designing my own RPGs when I was in 6th grade. Like, the moment I started playing D&D, I just started, like, coming up with my own stuff. And I made this, I had seen the movie Blade Runner and The Warriors in a double bill, and was so blown away by it that I wanted to combine the two. So I created this RPG called Gang War, which was set in a kind of dystopian Blade Runner setting, where instead of a single character, you played an entire gang.
That sounds
Now
awesome.
I think about it, well, not a bad idea. Maybe I should crack open my own notes,
revisit
maybe
that.
resurrect that idea.
I would play that. Jesus.
Yeah.
Cool. So you were introduced in college. So what kind of like really appealed you to the whole cyberpunk game and just delving into it a lot further than other game systems that you wanted to actually draw and write for? And I mean, it seemed you were a little more motivated with cyberpunk than Call of Cthulhu or
Well, I think like this is kind of mostly where my head was at the time. Like, growing up, a Gen Xer, entering into college, feeling, with the sort of like the first understanding of just sort of like how fucked the excuse me language, the society was, and feeling somewhat, cynical about things, and there not really being an RPG out there to sort of meet me at that place, And Blade Runner was already one of my favorite movies of all time, and so I immediately just like picked it up and wanted to run it, and I moved advanced the timeline ahead, and that was why my first, the Cyberpunk update #1, which eventually became Interface, was an advanced timeline for my campaign that I gave my players, and then of course just having more ideas and put together that first like interface that I made for my friends, which is just weird because I've now seen that one I printed up for my friends out there in the wild now. Like
Really?
I don't know how it happened, but like someone wound up with a copy of it, and which is pretty cool. But
I'm still looking for a copy of Cyberpunk Update 1.
yeah, well,
I've been
keep open.
Thinking you about it for years.
And it was just it's one of those RPGs where it just clicks with you and starts stimulating ideas, and it was just right game, right time.
Cool. So now that you mentioned Interface, how did you, Thaddeus, and Kevin start Interface, or came together to collaborate on this?
Yeah, well, it was Thaddeus and I had been close friends for a few years at that point. We hung out together at the local game store, and which had a game in the back room. There was the Saturday group and the Sunday group. And we had a Sunday group. The Saturday group was playing D&D, and the Sunday group actually played homebrew stuff. And so I ran the Cyberpunk campaign, and you would expect me to my content walk into the back room of this local game store in Alameda, California, which is his hometown, while I'm running his RPG, and I happen to have like, this interface right there. And I knew who he was because, he was a picture in the local convention scene. I had already been a player of MechCon and Road Striker and Outer Space at that point. So I knew who he was. So when he was like walks in the door of the back room, I don't even say hello. I just like grab that interface and I'm leaning across the table with my arm extended, holding it out to him like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And I wish I could ask him like, what it looked like to see a 19-year-old kid just like shoving his thing in his face. And we talked. We saw a little artwork that he was and at first he was like, hey, do you want to do some art? And the first thing I did art for was the near orbit supplement. I'm not happy with starting that. I think it was too bad, but that was the beginning. And then we started talking about interface. We want doing licensed fanzine and quarterly, and again, it took Thaddeus's participation for it to happen. Just because 19-year-old kid doesn't know anything, has some ideas, but doesn't know how to run a magazine. Like, doesn't know how to corral content creators or get shit done. So yeah, in essence, like, I might have been the wunderkind, but Thaddeus was the mastermind.
Yeah, Thaddeus is an interesting character. He I don't.
You should try to get him on here, actually.
That is my plan. Yeah, he's been on my Facebook friends list almost as long as you have, and yeah, he may be the only person I will ever admit that might possibly know more about comics than I do.
Yeah, no. For those of you who frequent Quora, he's one of the highest ranked answer guys on Quora, and pretty much renowned for his in-depth analysis of comics and comic content and their cultural place.
They are, indeed, in depth.
And he deserves to get interviewed. That's why
I will work on hooking that up. I think next we've got Ed Bohm and Will Moss lined up, and then after that, I think I'm gonna start going after Thaddeus.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Oh, and shout out to Benjamin Wright.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, shout out to Ben Wright on his recent nuptials. Congratulations.
Oh, he just got married.
Me happy to see him in a good place. Yeah.
He didn't mention that last.
Congratulations,
show.
Ben.
Yeah,
no, he didn't.
Good for him. I've been married for almost 30 years, so I believe in marriage as an institute. Granted, ask me 20 years ago, it would have been a different story. So, anyways, yeah.
So, my favorite article you did for Interface, it's a tie between the inmate penal corps and the pirate radio stuff that you did when Pump Up the Volume came out. Looking back, do you have a favorite thing you did for Interface?
I'm actually pretty proud. I'm pretty happy with the one little attempted short fiction I did. Little short story, Night City Blues. Yeah. I mean, it was sort of, it was a little trifle of a story. Like, there wasn't a whole lot to it, but it was kind of communicating the kind of the vibe I felt that I got from just sort of like the dystopian cyberpunk setting, and
that was the only piece.
Secondarily
of
to that,
there, right? That you guys published.
Yeah, it was the only time we did fiction. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of confidence in my writing ability back then.
Yeah.
Well,
that or the Antarctican Collective.
Oh, I love that one. Oh yeah.
I thought that was good too.
That's directly that was my campaign.
I think
my Cyberpunk campaign, basically.
To this day, that's the only time I've ever seen Antarctica even touched in the lore, and I always thought that was a shame. Like there should be more about that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of regions in the world which I'm surprised never got touched. Especially anything
Yeah,
that
but
was south of the border or south of the equator. Seemed
like even with the fan sites, I never saw anybody touch Antarctica, and
yeah.
I always thought, that would make a good full-size source book. Like I would definitely buy into that.
Well, for me, the big one is India. And granted, back in the '90s, I don't think anybody understood what a tech powerhouse India would have become in the 2000s, and the 2010s, even today.
No, it was still seen as kind of backwards back then.
Yeah, I mean, to me, India is, and a lot of these weird countries that are out there just really show you the whole the trope of cyberpunk, which is low life, high tech, in which you see this really bad poverty, and yet they are technologically competing with the rest of the world, if not getting beyond it.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the interface legacy living on with Red and what they're doing with the annuals of their free downloads?
Well, I haven't checked it out. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty cool that they're trying to create sort of like a conceptual continuity, carrying on the name. Yeah, no, I mean, it's very gratifying to me to see Mike's property living on. It's very gratifying to me to see that he finally has been getting a lot of the recognition that I felt he was due, and I'm really happy to see his success. I hope they paid him well. I hope Mike's basically set for the rest of his life, because he's given so much to all of us. He deserves it, and
those are facts.
yeah, and talking about the edgerunners anime for a moment, which was just I thought was phenomenal. As an anime fan coming up in the 80s, like 70s and 80s, I always know, I know that Mike Ponce certainly was. Getting a video game made of your property, your intellectual property, that's pretty cool. But getting an anime made for your intellectual property, yeah, now you've made it. I wouldn't be surprised if Mike was actually more excited about the concept of there being an anime based on Cyberpunk than the video game itself.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either. That's the big time there.
Yeah, I mean, even like Dungeons and Dragons, they've had hit or miss with computer games. They've had hit or miss with movies, and they've never really been able to hit home. But I think with the collaboration between CDPR, that it's actually working now, right? Because I remember the Art House Orient tried to launch with their novel series, and that wasn't. Ravengers was not that great. First step.
No. I think I would hope they would actually do a manga series. That would be great.
Yeah.
That would.
Well,
that would be phenomenal.
The Dark Horse comic books, to me, have been stellar. Just capturing the vibe.
I haven't seen them.
You got to check them out, man.
Yeah, seriously, they're really good.
They really capture the
very
dark future.
they're much more down to
Yeah.
earth than say edgerunners.
Yeah.
Very, very bleak and dystopian and
Mm.
kind of hopeless.
Yeah, the trauma
Uh-huh.
team one is really good. The other one I really loved was You Have My Word, which it doesn't end well, but it's definitely a good series.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, check
Yeah,
those
well, I'll
out.
definitely check those out.
So
Actually, I think my favorite of the bunch is Blackout, the one that just concluded, or I guess not just, but the last one that wrapped up. I think it's been my favorite so far.
it, I'm saying all of them are good. I just preferred
Sure.
You Have My Word just because it kind of I think at my age you see kind of similarities to the different genres, right? Which I'm going to give you a little bit of spoilers. It was basically an old school edge runner coming back out of retirement to fucking deal with their past. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't end well, but it's definitely well written, and I really like that series. And again, Dark Horses,
Yeah.
they only have 4 issues per I guess storyline, but all of them are
Mm-hmm.
stellar. So
Uh,
Yeah, I'm gonna see those.
in addition to Interface, you also did a war fanzine. Did those fans love and revere your work as much as we do?
Oh, Imperial Dispatches, which is the one Warhammer 40K magazine we did. Um, we only did one. Um, my only contribution to that was the cover, which I was trying to draw the Emperor and in his medical throne, but I didn't really understand sort of the visual style of Warhammer 40K at the time. I was coming right off of you know, drawing a lot of cyberpunk type stuff. So if you were to see that picture of that I drew of the quote unquote emperor of the Imperium of Men, it doesn't look like anything that you would consider to be 40K. Even though,
It's
like,
very cyberpunk.
yeah, it's very cyberpunk. Despite that, I'm a huge 40K fan, not necessarily of the miniatures game, but of the setting. I've read a lot of the books and ran a campaign in Fantasy Flight's Dark Heresy RPG, where you play agents of a Imperial Inquisitor. And so yeah, and I'm looking forward to
It's
this
it's
like
a
an Ison.
ridiculously deep setting.
Yeah, I like it. It's over the top and ridiculous. And whenever people try to get into those, like who would win, Star Trek or Star Wars, I go 40K. Your point is moot.
Crushed beneath the iron boot.
yeah, I was a
Yeah.
big fan of Warhammer
As,
Fantasy role playing when it came out.
yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's
I
kinda like
still
nice
hold that
gritty.
that's probably the grittiest fantasy setting I've ever seen.
Yeah, until Morkborg came out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was like I don't know if it was an English or the European art style of just like bringing in as much little details and grittiness to all their styles within their art. Kind of really attracted me because it just got you more into the whole setting that they portrayed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Games Workshop has always had just tremendous artists
Yeah,
behind it, and some just incredible minds.
definitely. So moving on to your interaction with Altar Saurian. Did you ever get the game with Mike and any of the other Altar Saurian crew?
Well, some of my you know earliest experiences with Cyberpunk were some of the convention games that Mike ran um, at the local cons, and so yeah, I got to play with Mike a few times, and then eventually, it was great. I would get to this point with Mike where I'd show up at the con, go find Mike, see what's going on, and he'd be like, "Hey, Chris, we got an open table over there. They could use a GM." And I'm like, "You got a mic?" And I go over there and like whip
That
up
is
some
the
little
best
2 hour
impression I've
run
ever
for
heard
him.
of
I was
Mike.
gonna say, like, that was fantastic.
Um, he has the best voice.
He
Mike,
truly
I
does.
mean, yeah. Um, and yeah, and that was just sort of like the kind of like the fun of kind of just getting to pal around with the Artel Saurian folks. There was Matt Anacleto and Derek Quintanar and Dave Ackerman and Benjamin Wright and I would make frequent visits to the Artel offices,
Back when they were
sometimes
in
just to hang
Oakland?
out. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and off of Ashby, and and hang out, chill, talk with Lisa, and Mike would show me something cool he was working on, or like you know talk to me about what art he wanted me to do, and yeah, it was great. And they were actually right next door to Chessex. Chessex was in the same building, Chessex the Dice Company,
Really? So
and
that's why they
Oh,
got the book covers so quickly.
yeah, and
Nice.
Dave Ackerman actually worked at both companies and got me a got me a summer job at Chessex one time, where I was putting dice into gem boxes and for a few hours for some spending money. Uh,
Nice.
but yeah, and then when I got the job at LucasArts, um, I that was sort of my exit out of the Artal world for the
Hmm.
most part. I did one last piece. That probably the two last pieces I did for him um, was the cover of "Listen Up, You Primitive Screwheads," and this one splash page piece I did in Cyber Generations of a like gangs fighting corpsec dudes.
Well, you were
Um,
credited in Live and Direct back in '96. Did you come back,
uh,
or was it
they might have reused something.
okay?
Yeah, they probably reused something from because I would sometimes just like give them stuff. Hey, I drew this. Oh, it's like, oh, this looks great, Chris. But, we can't use this right now, but we'll kind of like keep it on file. Um, so yeah, I still have the photocopy of the first check that I ever got from Artel Saurian um, for the first bit of art I did for him.
Cool.
so we've been doing this
Yeah.
thing where we try and track down, who created which of the iconic characters. Can you
Oh.
throw any insight on that? We recently discovered that Adam Smasher was
Ben
Benjamin's
Rice. Yeah.
character.
Well,
Yeah,
Benjamin's concept.
Yeah.
yeah.
Rach Barsmos was Ed Bombs. Um, Lisa was Spider and
Alt.
Alt. Mike, of course, has Morgan and Johnny. Are there any other iconics like Santiago? Was that still one of Mike's and Rogue or is that? Do you have any
Yeah,
Thompson.
insight
no,
on that?
those were all those. I'm sure those were all their house characters. Like, and so I never got to play in any of their house games or their in office games. Um, although I did slip in a drawing of one of my own characters into the 2020 core book. My fixer character, um, Kelly O. You'll see her. She has she's got the leather jacket with the geisha hairstyle, the mirror shades, and she's popping rippers. That was my fixer.
I love that.
And primarily the reason why I didn't have a lot of characters was because I seldom ever actually got to play Cyberpunk. I
Because
was
you were a
pretty much
GM for every GM.
perma GM. Yeah, I've pretty much always been like the perma GM, and I'm fine with that. It's game mastering is my art ultimately. It's what I love to do most, and so I was more than happy to do it. Besides, I get really snooty. Most people don't GM at a level I appreciate. No, just kidding. Like, um, I love it. I just love um, sending my players to another place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collaborative storytelling. It's the draw.
Yeah, so anyone who wants to check out that piece of art, it's on page 51 in the skills section.
Yeah, and I recently found the character sheet for that
Ooh.
character too.
Holy
I was like,
crap.
hey,
history.
Big history.
And
You should throw that on your Instagram.
a true artifact.
So
yeah.
you've been part of so many supplements. Was there any supplement that you really wish you were part of that you didn't get a chance to be?
Uh, Not a supplement, but actually, I submitted some artwork that I liked for Castle Falkenstein, and I was really enchanted actually by Mike's steampunk RPG, which that I think needs a revisit. I hope someone actually like
I
decides to maybe do
mean,
something with that. Um,
it was the first time I'd
and
ever seen a setting like that presented in RPG form.
Well, it was
yeah,
steampunk before steampunk.
Yeah.
I know. That's why and I was so into it, and and I'd actually read like K.W. Jeter and Paul D. Filippo who were writing steampunk stuff. So when the whole steampunk wave started rolling in like the mid late 90s, I was kind of
I
like, where the
mean,
hell were you guys 10 years ago? Like,
yeah, it's amazing to me how often like Artel Sorian and Mike have just been so far ahead of their time. Like
ahead of the curve.
yeah,
Yeah.
like Mechton, nobody was doing like comedy RPG or not Mechton, Teenage from Outer Space. Nobody was doing like comedy RPGs. The closest you got was Paranoia. Mechton, nobody was doing giant, anime inspired mech combat RPGs.
Yeah.
And of course Cyberpunk. But then they put out like Dream Park 9 or not Dream Park 9. Uh, damn it. Yeah, Dream
Dream
Park
Park.
Dreampunk, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Castle Falkenstein, just things that nobody else in the industry was even coming close to.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
now that you mention it, it's funny that, how Mechton and Battletech kind of came out at the same time. Both Facet and Altarsorian. And then Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, which I still debate whether it's Cyberpunk, but again, a FASA property that kind of came out at the same time. So I'm wondering if Mike had a mule in his, or a rat in his midst who was selling corporate secrets to FASA at the time.
Well, actually, all of the like fastest BattleTech stuff. Don't forget that actually sort of like spawned from a model series
Yeah, I know
that it came
it
out.
does.
I think it was like
From
yeah, I think it was Ravel or
Ravel, yeah.
yeah,
who were basically just like buying Macross, you know, mecha molds and then calling them BattleTech or whatever. Man, yeah, I was never a BattleTech fan.
I
thought
was. I'm still
their Western design mechs were. I thought their mech designs were pretty weak, but I
Yeah.
remember seeing a
I
copy of the
got
Japanese.
fall in on your side of that argument.
Well,
I'm on the
the
other
thing is, I
side
saw
of
a Japanese. I saw the Japanese, like, at the FASA table, they had a Japanese print of the Japanese produced version of BattleTech, and they allowed their Japanese artists to design all the mecha for BattleTech.
Yep.
And I was like flipping through it, going, "Shit, why the hell are you using these?" And they
Yeah.
didn't really like to hear that.
Well, there's
Like, we are very happy with our battle mechs. Thank you very much. All right. These just look cooler, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
well, that's a whole other subject that we could get into, but
We're rubbing Will wrong right now.
well, no, it's
That's all right.
I understand.
That's the price of being with me.
Well, keep on. You're talking about original, Japanese anime versus what, I was about to say Golden Dawn. No, it's Jesus Christ.
Golden Harvest.
Golden Harvest. Was it Golden
Go.
Harvest?
System,
Harmony
though.
Key. Harmony Gold. Harmony Gold.
Mechanically, BattleTech is solid.
Those people are just. Anyways, those people are just wrong. But
Yeah.
And then granted, I understand FASA and the whole BattleTech line and what they did. Kind of, it kind of similar to what D&D did, right? It was like, oh, we have all these, we got a bag of plastic Japanese figures. Let's make a game out of them,
Well,
which
I don't
D&D
want to throw
kinda
shade at
did.
FASA. They've done a lot of great stuff. People love them.
It's true.
I played the crap out of their Star Trek version. That was a fun game. Anyways, back on track.
You created just like a ridiculous amount of iconic images for the Cyberpunk franchise. Notably including like the gang representations in Night City. And as such, your art has been directly translated into miniature form. How is that gone over with you?
Oh, well, you mean like the Cyberpunk miniatures that Grenadier did?
Yeah, like the Maelstrom figure was straight out of the book. So were the Bozo figures. I mean, and the Bozo figures they've been redone.
Yeah, no, that was one of the assignments. It's funny, like I was taking it was like one of my after when I took a summer trip to stay with family in Europe because my mom is Austrian and all of her family's over there, and I had an assignment from Mike. They wanted me to design the characters for the minis, the LED miniatures, and so I drew a series of minis. You do that's kind of like a 3/4 view from side front and side back, and and in addition to those, they also directly converted the bozos, from the art from the Night City sourcebook art and made minis of those. And I still have my box of Grenadier minis that I designed. But seriously though, the sculpts on them are pretty bad. And my own character design limitations at that point. I keep them because I created them, and how many people can say they've got LED minis that they designed? But I can't say that I look at them and go, man, that was awesome. Look at that. Yeah, cool design. I'm just kind of like,
Well, at the time,
we all have to start somewhere.
That was the level of miniatures, that of quality you would get.
No. Raoul Partha, Raoul Partha minis were already like freaking beautiful. And actually, when Raoul Partha hired away Grenadier's main sculpting talent, and then Grenadier's minis started getting a lot better too. That's all.
I mean that
Yeah.
Maelstrom figure, the one that's directly based off the art from Night City, like
Yeah.
that was my go-to monk mini for years. So
Well, yeah.
I would have
I'm
never guessed that, you did it for, like, the miniatures came first and then the art. Like that's
yeah, yeah. Uh,
that's really
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, I was, I'm kind of lucked out. I was pretty early on getting to meet a lot of just, really amazing people who taught me a lot and gave me an opportunity to develop my skills. And Mike had on tap a lot of really great artists. Harrison Fong and Scott Ruggles among others. And
Mike
I always felt
Jackson.
I was, yeah, and I always felt I was more or less kind of, I don't know, a little bit of the Artel Saurian mascot because I was young and I didn't think my art was actually um, all that great. I was pretty happy that Mike was giving me a shot. I definitely feel like I improved over time. I think the art I did say in like the Euro Tour um, module is some of the best work I did for Artel Saurian. I'm actually pretty happy with it.
It was really good stuff.
Yeah.
I've actually printed out several of your pieces from that in my early attempts at making my own GM screens.
Oh, cool. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, I I owe a lot of where I am to the opportunities that Mike Pondsmith gave me, and yeah,
Yeah, and I think some of the people we've talked to, like Ross, um, Wynn, and Benjamin Wright, they're like, we wouldn't be in the careers that we're in now without the experience we had with Mike. And listening to some of you guys'
yeah,
tales of like just meeting with Mike and how quick Mike was like, hey, yeah, come work for me. I've
yeah,
always seen him at conventions or kind of weird, had a weird shyness towards approaching him and just understanding that, yeah,
hmm
he was a guy who was like, hey, you want to come work for me, or just approach me with
hmm
ideas. I'm willing to take your ideas and expand on them. Um, Seems like
yeah,
he's definitely enabler, as it were, for good things as opposed to
yeah,
a bad enabler.
totally. He was just really great at
And I
you
mean,
wanted to talk to him. Like he was just fun to talk to and just really engaging and full of ideas, and you could tell that he was sort of like, um, he was a creator, and you wanted to be kind of part of what he was creating. Um, and I think he's he really kind of just established in my mind kind of the model of who a creator of creative properties is. Just someone who shares their ideas and is able to kind of like bring people in and um, who can be infectious with their inspirations and who can also just provide you room to express your own self creatively and yeah, I mean, I try to be like Mike. That's kind of you know there's a little bit of that
I mean,
in there and everything I do.
so many people that have gone on to like creative, like really successful creative outputs started out with Artel Saurian. You with your uh, went on to a prolific game career in video games. Some of the artists, like the first time I ever saw Lee Permeo was on a Cyberpunk cover.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just really owes to I guess the creative forces that just like permeated under Mike's leadership, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. But I also think, I mean, I think the Bay Area as well, particularly in that era, was a very there was a lot going on in gaming uh, between video and tabletop. Because in the Bay Area at that time we had LucasArts, we had Electronic Arts, we had Crystal Dynamics, we had um, a number of other companies, and Bay Area was also the location of Chaosium and Hero Games and Artel Saurian, and so it was just the convention scene there was full of heavy hitters a lot of times. It's I played in a Call of Cthulhu game with Sandy Peterson at a local con.
It's awesome.
And that was pretty common. Like I said, I knew who Mike was long before he and I actually knew each other.
Yeah, to me that's
And so the Bay Area was just a perfect environment at that time.
a great
to be
environment
creative.
to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving along to our next question. So love all the art you've done for Cyberpunk. What is your
Thank you.
piece that you're most proud of? I know as an artist it's very hard because you have that debate of like, oh, I could have done this better, but try.
I really liked the piece I did in Cyber Generations. I was really working on my shading using markers. I was cribbing or trying to look. I love the way Scott Ruggles did a lot of the way he did his shading and blending, and was really trying to learn from how he did things, and it being that it was the last piece that I did for them. Technically, it was me at the height of my abilities that I was at that point, and so it was in essence a direct culmination of everything that I'd learned just from having to draw a lot for Artel Saurian. Just the practice that provided, my skills just naturally improved. And if you were to look, you could look. Maybe it might be interesting if you were to look at the first stuff I did in the near orbit, and then look at that last piece in Cyber Generations.
Okay.
You can see the definite leap.
So the follow-up question, I think you're probably going to be able to answer this pretty quickly. Now that you mentioned near orbit, what is the piece that you regret the most?
Oh yeah, that little genetically engineered elfin-faced baby boy in near orbit. He looks ridiculous. He has these freaking Vulcan eyebrows. I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
Future space must be Spock, right?
Yeah, I don't know. He's like a baby with the intelligent mind of a genius or something. I can't remember. So like, how do I draw a genetically engineered genius baby?
Nice.
Infant Spock. That's about. I mean, really, it works.
Yeah,
So
he still hired me after that.
I think
It wasn't my last piece, so it could have been that bad.
But I think it was a growing experience, especially when it came to for artists, at least when it came to
Yeah.
the gaming scene. So D&D, of course, had the best artists at the time,
Yeah.
and any
Yeah.
other game company would come in. Well, they classified them as the best. The Four Horsemen, right? Easily. Cadwell and Elmore. Shoot, I forget the third name. Parkinson.
And
Parkinson.
you don't say.
Parkinson
Oh.
was the best in my opinion, but
let's
I'm sorry, you
not
didn't
forget
put Errol
some.
Otis on that list.
I was
Well,
gonna say,
well,
let's not forget Errol.
but the D&D, when you talk about the artists who are the Four Horsemen, those, easily Elmore,
I think
Parkinson, and Codwell were considered the Four Horsemen. Yeah, Otis
Right,
was
between the
definitely
four,
out
that's Errol
there.
Otis.
Otis was out there. Holloway was out there.
I would.
There was other
know,
artists out there.
Yeah, I'm not that big a Parkinson man. I feel like he's very kind of derivative and model reliant, as opposed to someone like Trampier, or Otis, who's just kind of just has
Yeah.
raw, just incredible
Yeah.
creative talent and an understanding of color that is,
Yeah.
in my mind, pretty
And-
much
and
unmatched.
Tramp-
If you look at Errol Otis's recent stuff, oh my God, his stuff is
He's
so
come a
freaking gorgeous.
long, long way.
Oh my God, yeah.
I'll have
He's
to check
amazing.
it
And
out.
I'm sad every time, realizing Trampier isn't around anymore.
Well, Trampier, he produced such amazing stuff for Dungeons and Dragons, and then quit, and then didn't do anything afterwards. And I'm like, that is such a loss from an artistic point of view. He could have gone. I mean,
Mental illness is the son of a bitch.
yeah. And to me,
It
he
really
was
is.
just remembering his stuff at that time. He would have surpassed everybody as an artist, and
Yeah.
to me, it's just a shame.
And yeah.
So,
Next question.
next question.
All right. In addition to tabletop gaming, you've had, as we've mentioned, a long career in the video game industry, most notably with like LucasArts and
Yeah.
Telltale Games. And, which game? I feel like you might have answered this already, but which game do you feel you made the biggest impact on?
Yeah, I'd probably say the work I did on City of Heroes. I'm just getting to create a whole, like, 20 levels of content zone.
Yeah.
That was a great experience, and I would say, like, yeah, that and maybe I got to do make my kind of like leave a little legacy with the Star Wars universe, because something I created has kind of entered canon, at least from the perspective of one of the animated series. Is I was working on Shadows of the Empire, which was the introduction of the Black Sun crime syndicate in Star Wars, and I had to do a Black Sun base, and I was like, "Is there a Black Sun icon or logo or something?" And they're like, "No, make one." So I did. And now that's the Black Sun symbol I created is now the canon symbol for the Black Sun crime syndicate. And then when they showed up in one of the Star Wars animated series,
Clone Wars.
boom, there was my symbol on the wall in the animated sequence when I think like Darth Maul shows up to wipe out the.
Oh, that's Rebels. Yeah.
To wipe out the leaders of the crime syndicate with his brother. It was kind of neat. I was like, "Hey, that's mine." So that, but yeah, probably the City here stuff.
That's awesome. So your work has directly influenced 2 animated series now.
Well, you get to, if you're lucky, you get to sprinkle a little bit of yourself in something, right? And if you're luckier still, something you created will continue on.
That's the dream.
And yeah, I'm pretty fortunate in that regard, anyway.
So, just to catch people up, what is Chris Hockabout up to today? Like, tell us about your products, your new projects. You got the CODM comics the webcomics that you're doing, and you're working on your own RPG namesake.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of um, that's the that's kind of what's my focus at the moment. It was I had written a short story about 13 years ago, and based off it's kind of like this uh, intellectual exercise a friend of mine had done, and um, the basic notion was instead of a human like implanting metal and ceramics and plastics and cybernetics in their body, what if it was a synthetic being, an android, installing organic technology and biomechanical technology onto themselves? Uh, so kind of just like flipping the paradigm, and I wrote a story that basically, built a world around this concept to make it work. That's what you do. You kind of, as a world builder, you maybe start with a notion, and then invent a world around it that makes that notion make sense. And um, I wrote this short story, and it was okay, but the world had, I say the world had legs. It was an interesting setting. So over the next 13 years, I just kind of kept on kind of working on it in the back of my head, just kind of like adding to it and adding to it. And with the advent of AI image generation, which we can have a conversation about, I decided I'm like, maybe I can see if I can try to actually visually realize this world that I've had in my brain for the past 13 years. And the images I was generating were so close to the mark of what I had in my head. I realized that this would make a better RPG than a book, um, or a short story. And I sat down and started writing, and in 36 days, I had 200 pages worth of a 200 manuscript pages of an RPG. Um, and started play testing it, and the response to it has been pretty incredible. I mean, I can go into it like in terms of like I can kind of talk about what it is if you want me to. I guess it would make sense
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah. I mean, I've only had a week to read over it, but I gotta say it's one of the more unique concepts I've ever seen, and certainly one of the most unique concepts to come out uh, in quite a while.
Yeah, and
Well, thanks.
forgive me for my ignorance. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, and hopefully you'll let me in on the secret. So when you say
Yeah.
200 manuscript pages of content or a game, is it all mechanics, or is it also lore and history of the world in which this game is being created for?
So one of my goals with the game. So the game is called Namesake, and the basic premise is, um, at least the way character creation is. Well, I wanted to create an RPG that new players could come into that required absolutely no info dumps, that required absolutely no foreknowledge of the game or the game world. Um, all the players needed to know was who they were going to play, which they would just choose. And I was putting the players and their characters on the same level of ignorance about what was going on, about where they are and why they're there. And the essential premise is, at some point in the future, the ability to recreate personalities of the past um, rises to such a level that those recreated historical figures are virtually indistinguishable from their real life counterparts. And at some point in the future, Earth sends a ship to a distant planet. That ship lands on that planet, and then immediately starts instantiating personalities out of Earth's past, its greatest artists, philosophers, explorers, scientists, in these sturdy android bodies to study, explore, and develop the means to survive on this alien hothouse jungle planet that is essentially a ancient alien experiment, like an alien garden or an alien petri dish that's been allowed to just like run wild. And now the players exist as, you know, Mary Curie or David Bowie or Carl Sagan or Genghis Khan, existing on this world side by side, exploring an alien jungle full of, you know, ferocious monsters, using organic technology, because it's a metal poor world, and essentially it's a sandbox setting. And there's alien sites to explore for your, like, you know, your dungeon crawling element, and there's a lot of built-in capacity for the players to actually affect the world, change the world, contribute to it, because they are sort of like starting at kind of like a starting point as a civilization. And even though they've been around this, you know, the players will come into a world that's maybe been going for 200 years, but they'll still have like all this room to kind of like grow and shape the campaign setting. And I just wanted to create a game where Mary Curie and David Bowie could blast weird monsters with organic weaponry, and I made that. That's what I made.
I mean, the other fun thing I can see with that game is doing the research on these various characters, or not characters, but people from history, and as a player, just like learning about that one particular character that, you know, you might have been kind of interested in, but now that you're going to play them as a player, you would want to like delve a little more deeper and do a little more research and bring that to the table.
Sure. And
Yeah.
you know, for the players, they get to have like these sort of, you know, fun what if scenarios, you know, of like trying to role play these, you know, personalities from the past. And you know, I didn't want to necessarily shackle the players to whatever personality they chose. So, you know, built into the setting, and you know, it's a very mechanics light game. So of all of the content, a lot of it is cool stuff. You know, there's cool stuff for the players to have and use. So there's a lot of like player utility in the book. I had considered whether or not I wanted to make a player's book, because I have enough content in there. I could make 3 books. I could have like, you know, the player's book, the game master's book, and the world book, right? But I think I just want them all in one book. I just want everyone to have their own book. They want to run a game, they can run it. I don't want to silo off content based on what their role in this game is, because a lot of this game, like, you know, the game master is going to have, you know, whatever plots and story elements they've got going in their mind, but I want everyone to know everything there is to know about the world itself, and so there shouldn't be anything strictly off limits to the players within that book. And also being a mechanics light system, a very kind of like narrativist system, you know, as opposed to sim based. And then a lot of the book is taken over also by setting material, but a lot of it is about, you know, culture, and because you think about it, like, you know, how do you run a world that's occupied were populated by a bunch of androids who were recreations of like William Shakespeare and Richard Feynman and Ip Man and whoever. Like, it's an absurd concept. It's ridiculous. It's a bunch of these famous historical figures exploring an alien jungle world. It's ridiculous.
I mean, it's certainly unique and innovative. Yeah,
And
like I
so,
said, I've never seen
someone asked me,
anything remotely close to it.
yeah, and so someone is asking me like, what's the genre? And I said, biopunk absurdism. You know, because
That's
in a
about
way,
as
like, um, I've been just shifting more and more away from getting a little tired, a little fatigued of the cynicism, darkness, and dystopian nature of a lot of RPG content. Um,
it's starting to hit a
uh,
little too close to home.
I I I can't play Cyberpunk. You know, in part I can't run anymore. In part because I don't feel like I have anything new to say with it, um, and and I'm not willing to just kind of like go through the motions, um, and run it out of a sense of nostalgia or anything.
Yeah,
And overall, I feel like I want to see less cynicism in our content. Um, and I think one of the greatest sort of transgressions that WotC or Hasbro committed in the whole OGL debacle and how they what and is the fact that they took a world of content that as is at its heart is based around hopeful aspirations and and a dream of empowerment and a personal growth, and they kind of tore that away to reveal the cold capitalist heart that underlies all of it. And I don't want people to stop playing D&D, but I do want in general people to spread out more and explore other games that are out there. And I also want to see more hopeful content in the
yeah.
RPGs that are getting made. Um,
Well, I
like
think
I have a certain I have a certain utopianism built into this game that I've made, and it's predicated upon a system that is essentially that's essentially foolproof. And when I try to explain that in certain regards to the players, it is nearly impossible for them to even accept the notion of there being a foolproof system. And all I'm saying is, well, this is a game world predicated on the idea that this foolproof system is foolproof. And it's not because I'm saying a system like this can be foolproof. It's saying I don't want you to focus on the faults that you might believe exist within this system. It's irrelevant. We're gonna like just lay that out as this is a foundational part of the game world, and we're moving on from it. But within our current mindset, it's hard for players to not like, look for the cracks in anything, and want to pick apart and want to find like, what's wrong with it, and that's just pure self-defense, and that's totally normal.
Well, I mean, cynicism has become such a permeating force in everything that
Yeah.
it's refreshing to see, like you said, hope and a little bit of optimism and cooperation for the sake of mutual growth. I mean, it's
Yeah.
everything's seems to have moved away from that, and
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see your product in its final.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of it's good you mentioned that because it kind of raises in my mind is the game mechanics and the game world and the culture and everything is actually built around collaborative work, and the game mechanics are built around players pitching in together on something.
so. Is it a dice
And
system, or are you actually
no, it has dice.
okay?
Oh yeah, it's just a simple percentile. You make one roll for everything. Players do all the rolls. Game masters don't do any rolls. And
Ooh,
um,
like that
and
idea
it's a
too.
one roll. The only other dice I have players roll is for damage because, I'm not going to take that away from players. Players love to roll damage. Just let them roll damage. It's fun.
Amen.
Uh, and but the game mechanics are built around the players like pitching in together and like collaborating because the game world is so hellaciously dangerous where literally everything is trying to eat you or digest you or dissolve you or crush you or grind you up. Um, no one survives alone in Namesake. Um, you know, uh, the whole game, the whole world, the whole setting is based around even the party members being essentially a sibling group, and uh, and it's been great actually to see that in play. It's been great to see the way that players mindfully choose to cooperate on a task, and they know what like sort of how their characters kind of like contribute, um, uh, and it's been fun the one time when describing a PC who freaked out and ran off into the jungle. And I just said, and he was never seen again.
Nice.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think gaming, at least the various systems and how we've evolved through time, um, has changed over time, right? I mean,
Hmm.
the citizen, the cynicism of the 90s versus the cynicism of the 80s versus the cynicism of the 70s has continued. I mean, the subject matter has changed, but I think
Yeah.
that that perspective of people hasn't, right? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in the 80s growing under Reagan being like, this is authoritarianism, this is, all this crazy stuff. Granted, the decades have proven, oh yeah, no, we're going to show you how it can change, and how
Yeah.
it can really become what you feared, at least as a teenager in the 80s,
Yeah.
compared to today. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's definitely an
Yeah.
interesting thing as us gamers who've grown older look back at how we used to game in the early days and seeing how the gaming has
Yeah.
changed today,
I
and
mean,
what
Yeah.
gamers are looking for today. Um,
like
Yeah.
Cyberpunk was billed as dark fantasy, and looking around the world of today, go, well, not so much fantasy anymore. It's
could be worse.
Yeah. I mean, we're living, we're living, in dystopic times, and now even, you know, the advent of generative AI, it's like we're actually kind of now entering the technological singularity. And I thought Kurzweil was full of it, but he might have had. Although,
yeah,
for him, singularity is rapture of the nerds, and he thinks that like we'll all be like living in a virtual existence or whatever. It'll be like some kind of utopia. But
There's two ways,
but
right?
yeah.
That down that avenue that we'll eventually go to. Um,
Well, I mean, that's the nature of the singularity. We don't have the capacity to predict
yeah.
where this is leading. We just have ideas, and um, no one. Humans are actually really bad at predicting outcomes, um,
I don't know.
and are
Idiocracy seems to be doing pretty well.
No, I think
well, yeah,
humanity has a very pessimistic view of the future, and oftentimes we're not always right in that bleak outlook. There is some good that progresses, and there's also some bad.
hmm
But I think it seems like, at least in my mind, throughout history, it seems good things continue to happen. Now, granted, you know, the conquerors always get to rewrite history. So
Yeah.
the written history we have seems like we're progressing in a good direction. Now, yes, we're going to see some
Yeah.
badness and the bumps, but I think overall there is goodness that's eventually going to happen. But way off topic from just the
Yeah, I don't know.
gaming
Like,
conversation.
but I think ultimately I just wanted to create a game um, that got players to flex themselves creatively, maybe
Yep.
in ways they haven't yet, and and I also introducing the idea of having the players play historical figures was more or less kind of like giving them a shortcut to
Yeah.
thinking of a character in as an archetype or just kind of like having that fantasy of playing a famous person that they've admired or
Yeah.
known a lot about, but also built at the same time building into the game uh, the capacity for
Ready-made
that character to
personality.
reinvent themselves, um,
Yeah.
so that they don't feel like they have to exhaustively portray their chosen historical figure. Like they don't have to worry about being accurate. Like I have Thomas Aquinas as an NPC in one adventure I wrote, and he's a drunken lout, like you know, um, uh, who's basically running like a kind of like a nudist colony. Um, so it's a the player characters themselves are sort of like this is a new context for you. You are not actually who your memories say you are. You are a namesake. You are a recreation. That's where the name comes from. Um, but you are who you are. You are an individual, and you have the right to become whoever you want to be. So players can the game is sort of like you know it's kind of the idea of like, well, what if Bruce Lee woke up on an alien planet and continued his you know development of himself like in this new context? What might that look like? uh,
What if Hemingway was a teetotaling children's book author?
yeah, right. And it's funny because one of the players in my game is playing Hemingway, so we'll see
Oh,
see
that's
where he goes with
awesome.
it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, definitely want to check it out. Um, so let's get back on track with just cyberpunk genre in general. So what are your thoughts of Cyberpunk 2077?
Um, it's not the game that I probably would have made if I'd been given the opportunity. Um, I don't like, particularly in a game where the focus is tends to be at the street level. Um, I don't like these sort of like I'm the like getting involved in sort of like the most highest level of like getting directly involved with airside. What I'm trying to say is, I felt that the reliance on the core story was a mistake, and I would have preferred it to be more open-ended, like a more like Saints Row style, where it's more about. I always wanted a more of a cyberpunk life simulator where you've got a city, you can get involved with things, you can create relationships, you can build community, or like that it was more of a sandbox. And despite the fact that there were missions in Cyberpunk 2077 that just had my jaw on the floor at how great they were. And there are moments exploring the world that I was just completely taken by its beauty. I wanted more interaction, um, but that's
I gotta.
that's expensive content. Um, and they did one thing, which to me, in developing an open world game, is a cardinal sin. And if I had been in the room um, as a designer or a writer when this decision was made, I probably would have made such a huge stink about it that I would have either quit or been fired. Um, and that is, I hate it when games do this. Um, what was it? Uh, Horizon Forbidden Dawn did this, and it's essentially when you get to that last mission, the final mission, and there's that point where they say, "Do you want to do this mission? Because if you do it, there's no turning back beyond this point." And you complete that mission, you complete your character's story, you see all the loose ends tied up, you get all the resolution you want, and then instead of getting to experience the game from that moment forward, they time warp you back to the beginning before you made that decision to start that final mission, and just blithely tell you, "Oh, go fill out all the rest of the side missions." And
Yeah.
it completely robs me of motivation. Like, why the fuck would I bother completing any of these side missions? I know how the story ends, and it ends badly for me. So why do I even care anymore? And and on top of the fact that I know it's possible to get on good terms with Johnny Silverhand and he becomes kind of like a nice guy and you feel supported by him, but he was insufferable through most of it.
Yeah.
So annoying. And so I was just motivated to basically flip in the bird and say, I need you out of my head. And the game kept on telling you, we're putting you on track to get him out of your head.
Mm.
And that's a complete lie. You never get him out of your head. You never get to play the game where that guy is not yapping in your freaking ear and interrupting you every 30 seconds. And I hated that. Like, you told me this mission was to get Johnny out of my head. No, it was not. It was basically a rail. It was, railroading, like a
Yeah.
GM
At
railroad.
the end, it just kind of smacks you in the face and says, "No, that's not what we're doing."
And to me, that's not a
Even
Cyberpunk
though,
campaign.
yeah, I mean,
That's a
the
Cyberpunk novel.
they establish pretty plainly that the mechanics to separate the two personalities are there. Like if for whatever reason your body itself is no longer viable, well, we know there's cloning technology. We know there's people out there who are brain dead who can have personality implanted upon them. Like there's no real excuse for why one has to die and the other gets to live on. They both have.
Well,
Like it just,
I'm an experienced game developer to understand why they did it. Like,
sure, they want to wrap up their
it
story.
saves you.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it saves you a lot of work because
exactly.
to continue the game onward from that point requires the maintenance of a lot of set of variables that now the
Yeah.
world has to account for.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry about those if the game doesn't continue on from that point.
Yeah.
And probably the amount of ancillary content where Johnny is like chatting and talking or whatever. I don't know why you couldn't put an if and statement before triggering those things where it's like, if concluded main quest, do not, set play Johnny BS to false, they could have done
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the problem with the endings, right, is you're no longer in Night City, right, at the end. You're either uploaded into Arasaka's computers, you either die soon, you either leave Night City and go off into the Southwest.
I mean, two of them have you go to space.
Two of them had you go to those two kind of like you're those two seem to indicate that you're doing something else beyond what your street level was, right? You're moving on to some other bigger and better thing.
Which tells me a lot actually in terms of, it speaks to, I don't want I don't want to make any enemies here, but like it speaks to a writer who's more interested in their own story and how cool their plot is,
Yeah.
more than the player's subjective experience. Um,
Well,
Yeah,
I'm sure there
for
is
an
that.
open world RPG, it was awful railroading.
Yeah. And again,
um,
you don't know
and
what. And I think, well, if you look at the studio, right? The studio is based on Witcher,
yeah,
right? And Witcher
yeah,
has a
and
set
Witcher
path
Three
with their
is
character.
yeah.
So,
But they
go ahead.
oh, just that uh yeah, Witcher Three was actually one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and played all the way through to
Oh,
Blood and Wine, and that one actually probably had the best ending of any RPG I've played, or at least my favorite ending of any RPG I've ever
yeah.
played.
The only reason why I played Witcher 3 was because I played Cyberpunk 2077, and I thought Witcher 3 was phenomenal as a game.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Because,
It's got the
fantastic.
coolest monsters
Uh,
ever.
but
but
they had twice as long to work on it.
well, they had
Um,
twice as long work on it. I think, and again, I've had this debate with several different people. Is you know, you have, and again, you have more experience with the game industry than I do from a computer game industry. But one of the things I think CDPR kind of had, right? So they announced it in 2013, and really they didn't start working on it until 2017, 2016, maybe,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
they were putting out The Witcher and the supplements, so all developers are all gung ho towards that. And
yeah,
then when they started getting close to the release date, then came in Keanu Reeves, right? And Keanu
hmm
Reeves kind of basically said, okay, here's your bucket of water that you've been spoon feeding a tablespoon of water into for the past couple of years. And I'm going to kick it over and you got to refill it.
hmm hmm
So I think from a story
yeah,
wise, they had to go, oh shit, we got to refill this. And then
Yeah,
yeah,
we paid all this money for this celebrity,
yeah,
and now we have to get as much out of it as we possibly can.
and then from a game
yeah,
mechanic view, right? So the game mechanic view, you had a bunch of developers who knew how to program against Witcher. Now you're getting into different physics that you have to program, and of course, as a company, you're loyal to your employees, so you want to keep the
yeah,
developers. Hey, you guys are just going to transfer to here. However, those skills don't necessarily transfer over because now you have to get shooting mechanics, driving mechanics,
yeah,
net running mechanics, and all these new developers have to like learn. Oh shit, how do I program this, right? And
oh
taking
yeah.
that
I
whole
mean,
skill set and
it's
transferring it, just like
yeah,
again, it was a culmination, and that's why it kind of like was a shit show in the beginning when it got released, was because you had this
yeah,
perfect storm, and then you had the QA people who were like, "Oh yeah, no, we didn't QA it." Like, holy shit, you had this perfect storm
yeah.
of this
Well,
combination of shit that just built into this computer or this system. And to me, I think it's phenomenal with all those factors that they produce such a amazing game. Yes, it's not an open
oh
box
yeah,
sandbox, and everyone can call me like a toady to the game, but I just found it amazing
no,
and loved every single time I played it.
yeah, no. I mean, I've played it 3 times,
Yeah,
and I love it. And up until that one final moment where it kind of
yeah.
feels like I got,
When it goes in that final
like
mission,
they well, it just
The
kind of feels like
snapback.
they pulled a fast one on me, you know, like I was, you know. Now, of course, in subsequent playthroughs, I can just focus on playing the game kind of how I want to play it and not focus so much on the story. But also, it also does one thing I also hate, which I probably would have been really, been really annoying about if I had been working there, is the whole idea of a ticking time bomb. I hate hate the idea of there being an arbitrary time limit where if you don't
Oh,
complete
plus
things, you
it's
know,
so artificial.
Yeah.
Like they keep telling you the time bomb is ticking, but I mean,
And
my characters live years before they finally go on to that final mission. You know?
well, that's the other thing.
it's the
And I
classic Oblivion
and I
issue.
agree with you that that was one of the main really annoying part of that game that I really didn't like was the concept that oh, you have a ticking time bomb. You need to take care of this. This is something that's going to happen to you. In the first playthrough, I rushed through a lot of the stuff. I didn't do a lot of side missions because I thought, oh, waking up and, and seeing the glitching happening, I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah.
As a computer designer, well, as a story designer, that has repercussions. Like if you keep on
Yeah.
within a few days, you're going to start taking damage or doing something. Like as a GM, that's what I would do. However, the game
Yeah.
never did that, and I was like, oh, okay. Then the time bomb really
Yeah.
doesn't matter, and they put too much stress on it
Yeah,
that
instead of
I couldn't enjoy the game.
instead of feeling like you're getting weaker and weaker, you instead just get stronger. Point where it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Like well, it's like the Oblivion effect, where like, save the world, or these, Oblivion gates are opening, and it's terrible. And I'm like, I'm gonna fish for the next 2 years, and you guys will be just fine. There's
Yeah.
no Oblivion gates. It's
Yeah.
nothing. And but I mean, no, I've had so much fun with Cyberpunk 2077, and
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the big DLC release that's coming out.
Definitely.
And
Phantom.
I think I would have liked if they'd made it third person instead of first person, just
Hey,
because
fucking men.
I
Sorry.
disagree.
like no, dude, the clothing is so gorgeous a lot of times, and you only ever get to see it in the
I-
freaking
mirror.
like character screen. I want to see myself in those awesome clothes walking around the world,
I-
and not have
Yeah.
to switch to photo mode to see it.
Yeah.
And I
I
want
want
to
to
see
see my
myself
character doing the
in
cool shit.
cutscenes. I want to see myself in cutscenes. That's one of the things I loved about the Mass Effect series, was getting to see the character I created walking and talking and interacting, as opposed to, never. And
I see both sides of
'cause
that argument, but
oh man,
first
I was
person.
such a clothes horse in Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
I was such a clothes horse. I was like, like I have different outfits for different
For
things. Like,
every
oh,
situation.
it's a wet
Yeah.
work job. Time to put on my black leathers. Um, oh, I'm going out. Oh, put on my party guy outfit. It's like,
Well, for me, my
I got 3 different characters, and they all have completely distinct personalities in my head.
yeah, it's fun, and it's a beautiful game, and they
Yeah.
put a lot of work in those clothes. I just want to be able to see them more.
I mean, I agree
I mean, the
with that
the
point.
same holds true with Witcher 3. Like, all of Geralt's armor was gorgeous, and it was great to see it.
Yeah, it's just I
just
felt
wanna-
when
I
my
just wanna
first
see it.
playthrough, being first person, really brought me. I felt it made me more immersive in the game. But
Oh,
yes,
sure. Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
totally agree that yeah, I have. I mean, I'm
If by immersive you mean it gave me a headache that I could
Uh,
sympathize with my character because I was getting a migraine, I agree with you.
some people are like
no, I mean,
when you're first
no, I'm an
person
immersion
shooter
junkie
player.
too. It's kind of like, it's kind of why I feel like more horror games should be first person.
Yeah.
Like, Resident
Silent Hill
Evil
would be
is my
great
favorite.
in first person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I think missed a mark in 2077, at least for me, from being a Cyberpunk GM or referee for many years, was there's certain situations that I was like, wait a minute, you didn't go off after my allies? You didn't kill off like Judy or Pan Am or River or Kiri? I would have done that immediately if I was like Arasaka or one of those other people. Is like, I'm going to screw the players. What are you guys doing? You know, which
Well, yeah. I mean, that would have been kind of cool if you could have like I said, if it'd been more like Saints Row, where you could form a
Yeah.
gang and recruit members, and that becomes a resource that can get targeted,
Yeah.
that would have been cool.
But
Saints Row
there's
2 was amazing.
again, this was their
Mhm.
first Cyberpunk, so Cyberpunk 2 might include that and might expand on that. So
Yeah, we'll see.
definitely. And that was the other thing is like everyone's comparing like, oh, this is not like GT4 or GTO 4 or Saint Rose 2, and it's like, guys, this is Cyberpunk 1. They have room to improve.
Mhm.
I mean, Witcher 3 was their best. So
Yeah.
they still have
Yeah, I have no doubt that whatever they come up with next will be fun. It'll be beautiful and well made.
all right.
I think it just in the fact that I think they were under a lot of pressure to like get this out.
Yeah.
The fan interest was just way too high, and on top of coming out of Witcher 3, under incredible amount of pressure.
And the other thing is, I mean, because they released it in 2020, I don't know if there was, again, contractual things or they like
Yeah.
this is a must that we got to get out in 2020 type of situation.
I mean, they announced it in 2013. They kind of, like, karmically were required to put it out in 20.
And I think that's why they rushed to it. But anyways, we got about 5 minutes left. Chris, do you have any questions for me or
right.
Derek?
What are you guys playing these days?
I'm still running Cyberpunk 2020 using my own Interlock Unlimited rules. But yeah,
So what I'm playing is from a tabletop point of view. I've been playing Cyberpunk 2020 for the past 4 years. I started a High Rider campaign this year or mid last year. So it's all space with 2020. So I'm doing the O'Neill Revolution, the O'Neill 2 Revolution, and working with my group on that. I'm also running a Call of Cthulhu game, Mask of Nyarlathotep,
Very cool.
for some of my players. Different players, different genre. I'm playing in occasionally Derek's Cyberpunk game when we meet. I'm also playing in a Traveler 2nd Edition Mongoose as well, and occasionally I'm playing either X-Wing or BattleTech.
Cool.
So I'm still playing quite a bit of games. As for like computer games, 2077 I literally played the shit out of that game. Too much, I think. But I still refer to like old school games like Baldur Gates. I'm doing a playthrough again, like the original one. I have Doom, Quake, and a bunch of old school computer games installed on my machine that, you know, if I'm bored, I'll go and play through it again. Kind of like playing Pac-Man, as it were.
Cool.
I tell you what, video game wise, in addition to just never ending with my GTA or Cyberpunk games, I've been playing a game called The Ascent, which I got a highly
Yeah, that's a good
recommend.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fun.
it is. It is very atmospheric and far more detail than I would have ever imagined could go into an isometric game.
Yeah, yeah, I highly recommend it.
As we're getting close to the end here, I gotta say, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but way back in like 1992, when I was first getting Interface magazines, I found, you know, the customer service number in the back of one of the magazines, and I called it, and it was you, and you talked to me for like 2 hours, and
Yeah.
you know, I gotta say, it was very cool talking to you back then as a young guy first getting into Cyberpunk. You were very accommodating to my impetus. And that kind of
Well,
would
you
later,
know,
that
I'm grateful.
interaction.
I'm grateful for anyone.
Um, yeah, that interaction would be one of the influences that got me to start originally working. Paul Miner used to own Datafortress2020, and then he turned it over to me. But it was that interaction with you that led me to try interacting with him, and that led into my own
Uh,
storied Cyberpunk 2020 experience. So thank you.
oh, I appreciate that. I mean, I, I'm, I feel really lucky that I've gotten to like, just create stuff that people have gotten to see and use and I just, my goal ultimately is just to keep on creating and hopefully with namesake, keep your eyes out. I'll be, probably launching a Kickstarter to raise the art budget for it pretty soon. The manuscript is currently going through being edited by my editor, and um, I hope it touches people. I hope people have a good time with it, and yeah,
I am
uh,
I
Yeah,
am very
yeah.
much looking forward to seeing
yeah.
it kind of.
uh,
Definitely keep us updated, and we'll definitely
yeah,
signal boost your stuff.
Yeah, we'll promote your stuff, man. Just
yeah.
throw it at us. We'll,
Well,
we'll
thanks.
get to it.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. This is, uh, I'm just a dude, and I'm happy that I've been able to create something that's extended beyond my immediate circle, and yeah, I just hope to keep doing that.
Awesome, man.
I mean, you have absolutely been an influence, not just for us, but for many people out there. So thank you for
Well,
coming on.
Yeah.
Um, oh,
thank you for having me.
one last thing.
Okay.
Uh, the cover of interface number 4 is quite frankly one of my favorite pieces of cyberpunk art.
Uh-huh.
Uh, would you happen to have a clean version of that image anywhere?
Let's see. Which one is that? Is that the
That's the bar. Everybody in the bar.
Oh yeah. So that is by Mike Ebert. He was an artist also in Dream Park. He actually got me the job at LucasArts,
Oh,
and
awesome.
is actually the man also responsible for getting me into anime hardcore. Um, and he and I haven't been in touch for many years, not for any particular reason. But if I don't know where that is, if it exists anywhere, Thaddeus probably has it in a file cabinet somewhere.
I believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. One last question. I know you
Okay.
mentioned on another podcast about a consolidation of all the interfaces into some type of book, and that there was rumors about that. Have you heard any other rumors going
No,
forward?
nothing at all.
Nothing.
Actually, like, yeah, that was yeah, this was actually coming from inside our town. They were like, "Hey, what would you guys think if we reprinted all of Interface into one book?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, go for it. That sounds cool." And but I haven't heard anything since
All
then.
right. We'll bar their Artel for that. All right. Great. Um. Any. So where can people find you on the web, and what do you?
I'm so bad at self promotion. I don't have a website for namesake yet, or for myself. Although my partner strongly suggests that I do that, and so I'll get around to it eventually. And but uh, as things on namesake develop, I'm gonna, I will set up a website for that and all the ancillary sort of like communication channels. I do have a Discord up for it, but that's predominantly for the playtesting groups. And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to friend me on Facebook, that's where I can be found. I know I'm an old fart that still uses Facebook, but it has its utility despite its evils. So I can always be found there. I'm always easy to talk to. I secretly long for the praise of others. So don't ever feel like telling me that you liked my stuff will be greeted with anything but the warmest reception.
Cool. All right. Well, we appreciate your time and joining us. So hopefully we'll look forward to your namesake, and yeah, definitely tell us when it's coming out. So
I will.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Chris. It's thank you once again for coming on the show. I hope it's not another 30 years before we talk again. Feel free to come
Yeah.
back
Let's try
anytime.
to. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
all right. So everyone, again, Chris Hockabout, legendary guy. And I am Cybersmily. You can find me at cybersmily.net, where I have a bunch of Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red utilities. I am on Discord on various different servers that concern Cyberpunk. I also hang out and troll on Reddit. So that's where you can find me.
I am Derek Bernier, aka Wisdom 000. You can find my work at Datafortress2020. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Reddit. I troll through Discord. Yeah, reach out to us with your comments, criticisms, or complaints. Let us know what you want to see in future episodes. Again, we thank Chris Hockabout for showing up. We thank Rob Mulligan and Cybernation Uncensored for hosting us. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again
Thank
on
you.
the 3rd. Thank you. We'll see you guys again on the 3rd, where I'm trying to line up William Moss.
Yep.
Uh,
The legendary William Moss, who created quite a bit of the lore. So
yeah. So yeah, everybody have a great couple of weeks till we meet again.
yep. Till next time. Bye.
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 Cybernation Uncensored.